Watch out.
Hi there, welcome to the Forbidden Limb Podcast. I'm your host, Richard New, and I'm here as always with Jeremy Commander and Brian Heath. Today we're going to be discussing what's a good theme for a game. You guys just did a game together, and I remember discussions out in the parking lot after your game night about what the theme should be. So, what were the things that went through your guys' minds when you were trying to figure out what is a good game for, or what is a good theme for this game?
So I wanted to do a Secret Identity team game that had 3 teams. I had different design goals. I wanted no open your eyes, close your eyes phase, so no one could mess that up and you have to start the game over. I wanted no player elimination, like in some werewolf games or Shadowhunters, so everyone plays to the end. And I wanted to do 3 teams, because there's lots of Secret Identity team games with 2 teams, but Shadowhunters is the only one I can know of that really has 3 teams. Mm-hmm. Or now some of the werewolf variants can possibly have 3 teams, which I think is cool. And so I thought, well, what would be a logical theme for a 3-team game where you're all battling each other out? And at the time, I was using 6 locations in the game. So I went with spies from the Cold War. You had the communists, you had the Third World, and you had the Free World. And part of the game is you don't know who's on your team. And so that'd be true in the spy world. You don't know who the other spies are, who technically work for your side. In order to keep all your identities secret, you don't know who's on your team. You don't know what other spies are out there. And it fit with the 6 spaces. I was using the 6 spaces with the 6 continents in the world as you would jet set around the world, kind of like James Bond.
And then when I played that, there were 2 things I didn't like about that. One, that it was a spy theme, because I know there's a lot of spy games out there, especially like hidden identity type games. So I didn't want to go with the spy, or I didn't like that. This was even before I was gonna publish
a little
it.
too on the nose.
Yeah, I just didn't like. I was kind of sick of the spy games, but then also. Since it was countries, there were countries for each team. There was a lot of it was kind of based on flags, and it just kind of reminded me of like geography class and like
flags. A lot of people had a hard time telling them apart.
That too,
and that was one of the other issues.
That too. So I just didn't really click with me. And so when we agreed on us publishing that, that was one thing I was like, I don't think I want to do that. So we tried to come up with some other ideas.
Well, so the initial theme that Brian Clayton were going to do were criminals in the present. Yep. And it was going to be 3 criminal gangs robbing different parts of the city.
Talked about mafia, yakuza, and something else. I don't remember.
And so that one really worried me because it was 3 racial gangs. They broke down by race. Okay. And so now I have 3 racial gangs. You sent me the suggested art from your art board. And it was 3 clear, distinct races. And I was like, oh my gosh, race war, the game. Yeah. All right. So I was always worried about that one.
So you successfully convinced Clayton and I against that.
Yes, yeah, so I was really worried.
I was good with that.
I was also worried about that if there are no good guys in the game, then it's harder to relate to the game. If it's all bad guys in the game, I think that's tougher for some people to relate to the game or get into the game. I saw that happen when Decipher did their Wars TCG. And originally they did the Star Wars TCG, and you were either light side or dark side. And that people liked. And then you could play these big name characters, like, I'm Vader. So even when you're dark side, you had fun being the villain.
Right.
And you were playing against the hero. And then they did their Wars TCG, when it was all this shades of gray and there were no real heroes or villain, and that game was mechanically superior to Star Wars. They had cleaned it all up and learned all their lessons, but thematically it was inferior, and people didn't like it. They didn't have fun playing it because there wasn't clear heroes and villains. It didn't have the same experience. And so that I worried about that too. So I pitched Brian 8 alternate themes. To like, hey, it could be hackers, it could be this, it could be that, and went through these like 8 alternate themes of what we did. And we wound up doing with Prohibition, because Brian liked Prohibition.
That was one where I think there are some Prohibition games out there, but it's not a theme that's been completely played out.
No, there's only a few.
Right.
And it seemed to feel right with the game, too. That was another important part, that like even if we liked a particular theme, we needed to make sure that it fit with the mechanics, where we wouldn't have to change the mechanics much at all in order for it to work. And so that one, after talking about it quite a bit, we felt like that would work. So campaign is now complete at the time of this recording. And we got some feedback about, some people mentioned it during the campaign. We kind of did a little bit of a survey about the game, the campaign itself, and a lot of people said that they didn't like the theme. That was one of the highest points of concern for our backers, that they didn't like it. So one, it being a U.S. historical theme. So people outside of the U.S. were like, U.S. prohibition, that doesn't really, matter much to me. We don't care too much about that. A surprising amount of people just didn't drink, that they didn't drink alcohol. And the alcohol theme was something that they just didn't want to be a part of. They didn't want to support that kind of campaign.
Okay.
And that I didn't think about at all. I didn't really consider that. You actually brought that up, even before the campaign. And I was like, yeah, maybe a few people won't like it, but I didn't think it would be.
And putting booze in the title. So you can't
true.
hide. If it was like
True.
Monsters or something, if you didn't put the alcohol in the title.
Mom, can we buy this game?
Right.
No,
we can't.
And we had that happen. So we're at Comic-Con doing promotion and testing for the game, and we have a family walk into the game room up where we're at in the hotel at Comic-Con. There's a big game room, and all of Brian's games are set up. And the family are looking for a game to play. So I was there, and it's the first thing I said, well, you can play this Booze Barons game. And the family's like, nah, booze, alcohol, not going to do it. I'm like, okay, how about we play Good Cop, Bad Cop? And so I started to explain the game, like, well, the guns, they see the gun cards. Do you shoot people in this game? And I'm like, yes, you do shoot people in this game. And they're like, no,
Brian, it's not family friendly. That's what I'm discovering.
It's not.
No.
And it's like, no. So then I explained New Salem, and he said, witches. And I was like, witches? Is this going to go over? And they're like, oh, yeah, we'll play that one. I'm like, okay, all right. So we sit down and play it. And about halfway through the game, the kid, who was with his parents, he's like, what's a brothel? Because the brothel is there in the New Salem cards depicted, and the parents had to kind of deflect that and explain that, and they were nonplussed. And so you're right. So after that, we realized that Brian doesn't have any truly family friendly games, and I think the family friendly market is big. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of families that play board games together as their family game night, and a big consumer of board games is Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church. They promote playing board games with your family, and they're a big segment.
Before I moved to California, my regular Friday night game night was at
an LDS church.
A fellow teacher of mine who was a Mormon, and so he had a bunch of his friends over doing a game night.
For years in the TCG space, that was a big thing there too. There were lots of Mormon families playing games, and they want a game they can play as a whole family, and that's a significant segment of the market. Or now we look at the reviewers. You look like Father Geek or Geek Dad, and they're looking for games they could potentially play with their family. They play other stuff too.
I'm definitely looking for that. I mean, even though I can't.
Yeah. You're playing it.
I haven't even won yet, but I'm thinking, this will be a good one for him. This will be good. Yeah.
And so if you do a theme that's not family friendly, you are potentially leaving money on the table. You are leaving people out, and that may not be good for you.
Okay.
And then also, if you want to get into a big box retailer, if you want to be in a Barnes & Noble or a Target, if you have, they wouldn't put Booze Barons on the shelf because, the game isn't really targeted. Section. Yeah, I mean really at all.
Or if you had a big bloody zombie game, the big bloody zombie cover art, is Target going to put that up on the shelf?
I think they could do a cartoony zombie game, but not not a very realistic bloody one. Yeah.
Right. And that's where they put the games is in the toy section.
And I've seen other publishers and talked to them who have redesigned their box in order to get into Barnes & Noble or a big publisher, because their box is either too small, could be easily stolen, or it wasn't laid out in such a way that would go into one of those big box retailers very well. Yep. So you have to think about that when you're producing your game.
So we're actually the next print run of Bombers and Traders that we're doing now. We're going to take out. We have the role, the trader role, and the suicide bomber role. So we're taking out the suicide
also
part.
Family friendly.
Exactly. But that's about the only thing in the game that would be, that would prevent us from going into a Barnes & Noble if we can, if we could make that happen. So we're taking that out, and now there's a trader and a bomber. So that it leaves it up, it makes it a little,
I should say, Brian mentioned the survey earlier. So he did a survey of people who did not back the game and kind of saying, hey, what was your reason for not backing the game?
That had backed previous campaign.
And that was it. So if you participated in that survey, we appreciate it greatly because that was valuable insight. And the number one reason was theme. 37.9% of people said the theme was a turnoff for them.
What other type of themes could turn people off?
I think anytime you go into the adult theme arena, I think you are if your theme is PG-13 or higher, or your content related to that is, you have the risk of alienating a significant part of your audience. So back in the TCG days, one of the TCG companies I worked with, very successful, I've done several TCGs, they did a TCG party game, and it was a social TCG multiplayer, and that that was most TCGs were just one-on-one, and here you could play with 5-6 players. It was a lot of fun with lots of players. It was very social and hilarious. But they gave it a PG-13 theme. It had a fairly adult.
I think I know what one you're talking about.
Yeah. And so what happened was that in game stores across the country that would carry this, this manufacturer's games, is they wouldn't really put it on the shelf. It'd be on the top shelf or the bottom shelf or under the case, because they didn't want to put it on the TCG shelf next to Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And all the kids coming in to buy those games. They didn't want to have this adult game right next to those. So they kind of hid the game in their store. They had it, and it hurt the discovery of the game and people being able to buy it, and that really hurt the game quite a lot. And if they had done a PG theme on that game, given that it was multiplayer and it was social, I think it would have done much better. In that case, I think the theme really hurt it because it knocked them off the shelf.
In that case, it was a sexual theme that is the one you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
just to be clear. For our listeners.
Yeah. So I want to try a little thought experiment, if that's all right.
That's cool with me.
So I'm going to give you each a piece of paper, and I want you to write down. We have not discussed this ahead of time, so this is genuine off the cuff.
I have no idea what's going on.
3 themes that you think are overused in board games, or that you are kind of sick of seeing, and we'll compare notes. Let's just read them off, and then we'll discuss them. So
right.
I picked zombies, Cthulhu, and generic fantasy. They're like, oh, you're all wizards in my made-up land, and you're battling each other. And I'm like, okay, all right.
I had 2 of those.
Yeah?
In different places, but I had 2 of those. I had the basic generic fantasy, I said Lord of the Ring-ish. And then zombies was another one of mine.
Yeah.
My third one is trains.
Trains.
That's a good one.
Okay.
I feel
That's a
like
very
we
good
see
one.
tons of those. And yeah.
I would agree with that. Yeah, that's the classic Euro theme. There's 8 billion train games because the Euro players like that. But yeah, I think it feels like it's overused.
I overlapped with both of you on zombie and fantasy. And then I went with spy just because we mentioned it earlier. It was
No, that's fair. That's fair.
But but that is interesting.
Zombies. We all agree on zombies and fantasy. There we go.
And don't get me wrong, I love zombies. I mean, Walking Dead.
Yeah, it's just too many.
I'm a huge fan. But yeah, there is like, I'll see a game and it's like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I played some really great games where, I pick up a shotgun and, blast some zombies and everything. And then I played some really horrific ones, and it just feels like it's just too easy to say, I'm trying to make a fighting game, so what is something we can fight a bunch of, and it's easy. And that's where I think fantasy comes into, because you just have them go after, you get attacked by giant spiders or orcs or whatever, and then, it's an easy theme, because you can just you can go from memory and just go, that, and then boom, you have...
There's a lot of things you don't have to explain again.
Exactly.
You know how that, I'm going to have to attack, and I might have hit points, and I might have magic points, and like that. It's just things that it's just like in like user interface design. It's the same kind of thing. If you use things people are familiar with, then they're not going to have to learn it again. So it's actually something that's commonly used there. And as a publisher, I was hesitant to even write down anything because. It's becoming less important to me, like this idealistic, I'm not going to make a zombie game, because really, as a company, we're a business. Dead
of Winter's doing really well.
Yeah, whatever sells.
That was late to the party.
I want to do, because I want to make something people want to buy. And if they want to buy a zombie game, then I want to make a zombie game.
Right. It's like you can complain as much as you want about young adult literature, but if people are liking the vampires,
movies, that was another one I should have put down. Yeah.
There's not many vampire games, as many zombies, though, right?
True.
Maybe in books and movies,
agree with
so
that.
not on board games.
True.
So, all right, so now let's do it again. What are 3 themes you really want to see more of? You want to play a game set in that... All right, Brian, what are the 3 themes you would like to see more of?
So I kept mine very general.
Okay.
I just said like a twisted theme. Like just not anything.
No, I have random down.
Anything that like somebody probably came up with when they were on some kind of drug.
Anything we come up with while playing board. No, I'm sorry. What was the?
We were just talking about Brian not having any family-friendly games.
Yeah.
I want a twisted
the
game.
game.
The Unpub game.
Yeah,
like
whatever it's
like
called,
anything come up with that, because they're always
deck
like
building, the deck
ridiculous games. I
love that game. It's hilarious. Unpub the card game. It's so much fun.
But I guess I'm getting at, I want like an artist or an incredibly creative person to come up with the theme. Not these like logical mathematicians and statisticians and they're coming up with boring themes. But I want somebody to come up with something just
I want to hear. Because someone could pitch the game like you go back and you save Mozart, like before he died too young, and then he comes forward and he's, blasting away killer bunnies from the future or something.
Right.
I'm like, why are we not playing this game now? It's so ridiculous.
And that really brings me to kind of my and yes, it is a cop out, but
it is
unique, just a unique theme that I haven't heard of, and that would kind of fall into that category of just it's not like twisted or really creative, but just unique.
Mm-hmm.
So
I feel like you didn't answer the question.
Well,
that's not a theme.
I didn't know you needed it to be.
I think just something like off the wall, something crazy. I again, my word was random, but it was just something like just mashing together weird stuff. Pixel Lincoln is just a good example because it's like I see that game and I'm like, that's just so weird.
Video games and Lincoln,
8-bit, graphics, and then Lincoln. Why? It makes no sense, but it's. It makes me go, we have to at least play it once.
The theme makes that game.
Yeah.
And my last one was, it's kind of hard to explain. So not kid-friendly, but not like one of the raunchy games or anything either. But just something because everybody's so scared to do something that's going to offend someone. Mm-hmm. They either go, I'm going to offend everyone I possibly can, like Cards Against Humanity, or they go, I'm not going to offend anyone. But I kind of want something where they try to go with just like a darker theme that a lot of people aren't going to like, but it's going to be that's going to make it unique, and it's going to be, I don't know, just. Again, not like adult or sexualized or anything like that, but just something that isn't so nice and clean cut and I don't know, straight edge.
What do you have?
Yeah.
So I had hackers. That's a big topic of our time. Sony getting hacked and different corporations getting hacked and all their secrets spilling out. And I
feel like I do see a lot of games.
What's a good hacker game you've played?
Infiltration.
Other than that one. I love that game too, but that's like Cyberpunk too. It's hackers and Cyberpunk.
Sure. And it's the same universe as
as Netrunner. Yeah, but outside of that universe, I don't think there's much out there. I've seen one or two, but not really. And it's a very contemporary story of our times.
True.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that's be interesting.
I agree.
And it helps people understand more of how that works.
I've actually seen a lot of prototypes that are hacker games.
But they haven't made it.
No, I agree.
Yeah, man. Cats and kittens, and here's why I think cats and kittens is a good theme, is because this is a game, not to be stereotypical, that gets women to play. Mm-hmm. So now independently, I've heard from multiple people like, I want to design a game. So I asked my girlfriend what kind of game she would play, and she said I would play a game about cats. Mm-hmm. I've had independently multiple people tell me this, and they had this conversation with their girlfriend, and they said the same line of things. And I've seen cat games on Kickstarter, Combat Kittens and
Schrodinger's,
whatever
it is,
cat game after cat game, Exploding Kittens.
Yeah.
I'd say that's a tribute to the Oatmeal, though, and the Oatmeal's social following. Mm-hmm. But that cat theme, and it's very broad, and that lots of people will try that just for the cute cats. So I think that is an underused theme.
And I like mixing it with something a little bit more...
cat mashup.
Yeah. We're a little bit more hardcore, like a little bit more... like any battle... Like those... all the examples we gave were like battle cats of some sort.
Yeah, the Combat Kittens puts all the cats in...
With a theme, you're bringing in, like you said, the ladies. And then, not to be stereotypical again, but with the mechanics, or with the other half of the theme, you're sort of bringing in the guys like, it's a cat game, but we get to kill each other as cats. So that'll be okay. I like mashups like that, because it bringing in the cute and bringing in, like, unicorns that stab people with their horns, like that. Okay, I'll play that game.
I think another thing that I'd like to see more of is... kind of the Victorian era of Europe with all the royal families and all the political games they would play with each other. Like, we're going to try to take over this territory. We want this territory, and we're going to marry this guy to this guy, and we're going to try. And it's all that, all the political machinations that went on in Europe, Victorian era, and just prior to the European. So maybe Napoleonic through Victorian era Europe. I think it's very interesting. You could do lots of interesting conflicts with these different families. Battling it out.
Especially if you had like a US-based publisher who did that game, you could bring in international backers too.
Correct. So those are themes that stand out for me.
Okay.
What do you got?
I said one of mine was medical. Like I like games with like a medical theme.
That screams kind of boring to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Pandemic.
ER, you're saving people. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
I mean,
I just like that theme just because it's something I can draw my wife in with, so that's why I put it down. She's a doctor, so it's, something that I can say, hey, you might actually like this one, and she's really not a game player, so...
Bad Medicine, Guilds of Bad Medicine, Antidote.
Yep, that one's completely, selfish for me. And then the other one is wrestling, and I put after it real, because, I'm not up for the,
like Olympic wrestling.
Yeah, and that's personally up my alley.
Okay.
That's something that, I did in high school and college, so I like it, and I would love to see something that actually sort of tries to mimic that and make that.
I would never play that game.
The traditional wisdom
Again,
the traditional wisdom in the game industry is that sports games can't make it.
Yeah.
And then if you do a sports themed game, it will fail. And because most of them have, but I would also argue in the past that most sports themed games have been terrible.
Yeah.
And Eagle and Griffith, their baseball game, did fairly well.
Baseball Simulator 3000.
It's.
I don't think that's Eagle Griffin. Is it?
It's Mike Fitzgerald's game.
That's baseball.
Baseball in the future with the cyborgs.
3000, I think it's
called.
I've heard so many people talk about that game. Yeah,
it's a great game. It's really cool. It's an interesting deck builder. And then Bottom of the Ninth from Dice Hate Me. So I think you might see that you can't do a sports game maybe starting to turn.
Thank you guys for joining us. This has been the Forbidden Limb podcast, the podcast about the business of board games. I've been your host, Richard New, and I'm here as always with Jeremy Commander and Brian Hink. I'll see you across the table someday.
Hey, Richard here to remind you to check out our guild on BoardGameGeek.com. Search for Forbidden Limb under podcasts. Drop us an idea for a future episode or comment on a previous entry. And if you feel like supporting us, you can go to Patreon.com. That's Patreon.com. Search for Forbidden Limb there as well. Donations are used for equipment to improve the presentation of our podcast. Thanks for watching or listening.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.